You have felt the sugar rush of motivation before. It spikes, dazzles, and vanishes, leaving you staring at the same walls with a louder clock. Hype is fireworks, beautiful, brief, and gone. Frequency is a hearth, quiet heat that stays, turns rooms into homes, and asks for wood, not wishes. Here is the first shift. Instead of chasing a feeling, you steward a signal. Motivation demands bigger drums and brighter lights. A signal asks for tuning. You do not beg reality to change. You adjust the note you sustain. And rooms answer resonance before they answer requests. Imagine a radio dial, twisted a hair, and the same antenna meets different music. The tower did not move. Your selection did. You were scanning for louder songs when the real work was to refine reception, reduce static, and hold a channel long enough for life to harmonize. Motivation loves declarations. The field respects coherence. Declarations are easy when nothing resists you. Coherence is forged where friction lives. You craft it in tiny places you used to ignore. The breath before you speak, the pause before you tap, the posture you choose when the room feels off. Each is wood on the hearth, not a spark in the sky. Another picture. A tuning fork sings and the piano wire across the room begins to answer. Not because the fork begged, not because the wire believed, because the frequencies matched long enough for energy to travel without fighting. That is your work now. Not louder, truer, not more intense, more consistent. You are not a spectator of outcomes. You are a caretaker of conditions. Motivation tries to leapfrog conditions and bargains with tomorrow. Frequency work is humbler. You set the room. You set your rhythms. You set your inputs. When conditions align, results arrive like weather, unsurprised by their own arrival. This is why you can feel destined moments in your body before your mind finds language. Your nervous system reads pattern faster than your thoughts, and it loves stability. It trusts what you repeatedly practice. It distrusts sudden storms. When you hold a steady note, your biology relaxes into it, and action costs less because friction declines. The old pattern looked like this. You waited for an emotional spike, launched a sprint, then faded, and called the fade failure. The new pattern is different. You tend a small signal until it can carry weight. You lift less, more often. You trade heroic bursts for dependable voltage. You become someone your future can rely on, especially on plain days. Ask a question at the door of every task. Am I about to spike or about to steady? Spiking craves drama and applause. Steadying craves clarity and repetition. Choose repetition. Choose the same 5-minute warm-up before you write. Choose the brief walk before you call. Choose water before you open the app. Choose the smallest move that sponsors the signal you want to live in. Skeptical minds will ask for proof. Notice the places where your life already mirrors your sustained notes. The friendships that exist because you kept showing up. The skills that improved because you kept touching them. The rooms that feel different because you enter grounded, not grasping. This is micro-evidence, and it accumulates. None of this asks you to pretend certainty. It asks for stewardship. Think of a lighthouse on a fog bank. It does not rage at the sea. It turns again and again, predictable and unhurried, painting the dark with a rhythm boats can trust. Make your presence like that, not a blast. A cadence, not perfection. A pattern that holds through good weather and bad. Your attention is the dial, and your day is the amplifier. Where you point it becomes the climate of your hour, then your week, then your year. If you scatter attention, you scatter power. If you gather attention, you gather possibilities. This is not mystical bravado. It is the plain math of where you spend your minutes and what they begin to echo. So begin at the hearth. With wood you can carry. 2 breaths longer before you decide. 2 distractions fewer before you start. 2 degrees straighter before you speak. Practice like this until your signal stops wobbling and starts humming. Then the world, which has always been listening, answers with rooms that fit the note you keep. Here's the turn. You do not need to feel different to begin different. You need a repeatable entry. In the next section, you will learn a 2-minute observer focus drill that narrows noise and nudges probability toward one clean step. For now, let hype visit, but give frequency the keys. This is your house. Keep the fire lit. You've heard that attention is precious, but here's the deeper cut. Attention is a collider. Every moment you hold it steady, unseen probabilities crash together and collapse into something you can walk on. Reality is not only what already happened, it is also what your gaze is sculpting right now. Most people scatter their awareness like confetti. It looks colorful, but it never lands in one place long enough to form a floor. You, however, are learning to treat your attention as concentrated light, something that doesn't just illuminate but actually changes the surface it touches. When your focus lingers, dormant possibilities lose their ambiguity and commit to being real. Picture this: a stone suspended above 2 bowls of water. Wherever you release it, ripples will form. Until you choose, both futures exist. Your hesitation delays their birth, but the instant your attention decides yes here, not there, gravity commits. The waves begin. That's what focus does. It tips probability into action. There is research suggesting your subconscious begins shaping your moves before you feel them. Think about it when you commit your gaze. Your nervous system reconfigures microseconds ahead of your awareness. That's why attention is not passive, it is a priming device. It builds the runway before the plane even appears in your mind. If you leave your gaze unfocused, your brain defaults to old runways, familiar patterns you've walked 1,000 times. But when you consciously aim, you bulldoze new ground. Here's a practice. 2 minutes only, no special gear required. Call it the observer focus drill. Sit or stand comfortably. Pick one object in your environment: a pen, a window, your own hand. For the next 2 minutes, do nothing but attend to it. Notice edges, textures, shadows. Let your breath fall into rhythm with your observation. If the mind wanders, gently return. The object is not the point. The point is proof when attention is sustained. Noise falls away and subtle details emerge. Life does this too. Hold still, and hidden dimensions come forward. Repeat this drill daily, and you will notice something. You move more decisively afterward. Small tasks that once bloated into endless options now narrow into a clear next action. That is the collider at work. Your attention collapsed the maybes into one move you can take. Decision fatigue shrinks. Energy releases back into your system. Think of athletes at the start line. Their eyes are not darting around the stadium. They are locked down. That lock is not superstition. It is physics of performance. Where the gaze goes, chemistry follows. Adrenaline, breath, muscle fiber all sync to the target. You can use this same law in everyday moments. A meeting, a conversation, a creative block. Fix your gaze. Let your focus collide with possibilities, and watch one timeline crystallize. Some resist this practice because it feels too simple. But simplicity is the doorway. Complexity exhausts you before you begin. Precision rescues you. One target, 2 minutes, one breath pattern, one choice. Then action flows, not from hype, but from coherence. Remember, your attention is not a flashlight that reveals reality. It is a chisel that sculpts it. Where you hold it, you carve. Where you abandon it, potential decays. Scatter it, and you scatter yourself. Steady it, and you steady the ground beneath you. Here's where we pivot. You've learned how to collapse possibilities by sustaining focus. Next, you'll discover how to steer with more than sight. Your heart, broadcasting fields stronger than your brain, can become the rudder. With coherence between breath and beat, you stop fighting your biology and start steering with it. You've collapsed possibilities with focus. Now it's time to steer, not just with your mind, but with the full broadcast of your body. Your heart isn't just a pump, it's a transmitter. The electromagnetic field it generates stretches beyond your skin, brushing against the room before your words ever arrive. And when your heart and brain fall into coherence, you stop wrestling your biology and start sailing with its wind. Think about the last time you felt truly centered. Your breath was even. Your shoulders dropped. Your mind clear. That wasn't just a mood. That was coherence the moment your nervous system, breath, and heart rhythm agreed on a tempo. In that state, choices felt smoother, interactions cleaner, synchronicities more frequent. You weren't forcing reality, you were steering it. Here's the practice. 90 seconds is all it takes. Sit upright, feet grounded. Place a hand over your chest. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4. Exhale gently for a count of 6. Imagine each breath as if it's flowing directly through your heart, not just your lungs. As you breathe, recall a memory that warms you, a laugh, a sunset, a moment of safety. Let that feeling tint the rhythm. Within a minute, your physiology shifts. Your heart rhythm synchronizes with your breath, and your brain follows suit, entering a more ordered state. This is not theory, it's experience. Try it before a conversation, and you'll notice responses soften. Try it before tackling a decision, and clutter clears. Your body becomes a compass, pointing not toward safety alone, but toward truth. Here's a metaphor. Picture your mind as a sailor scanning stars, and your heart as the keel beneath the waterline. Stars give direction, but the keel keeps you steady when waves rise. Without it, you drift and capsize. With it, even strong winds become allies. That's coherence, your invisible keel in the unseen waters of daily life. Now, why is this steering so powerful? Because much of what sabotages you is not external resistance, but internal noise. Racing thoughts, shallow breaths, tension in the gut. These signals distort your broadcast, like static in a radio. Coherence clears the static. Your broadcast sharpens, and environments begin to respond as if tuned to your station. People sense stability, opportunities track toward clarity, even your own doubts lose volume. The old habit was to demand readiness from the mind alone. You waited for your thoughts to align perfectly before moving, but your mind is fickle, easily swayed by memory and fear. The heart, when aligned with breath, is steadier. It whispers, "You're already enough to begin." That whisper is not hype, it's physiology working in your favor. Here's a ritual. Before you enter a room, pause at the threshold, one hand to chest, one slow breath in, one longer breath out. Anchor to a memory that steadies you. Step inside only once you feel your shoulders drop. That is steering. That is coherence shaping your trajectory. Over time, coherence becomes more than a technique. It becomes a signature. People may not name it, but they feel it. Your presence carries less friction, more magnetism. Decisions seem easier in your orbit. That's not manipulation, that's resonance. You've become a tuning fork others unconsciously calibrate to. So when chaos swirls, remember you have a rudder that no storm can snatch. Not louder thoughts, but steadier rhythms. Not frantic effort, but synchronized breath and beat. With coherence, you steer reality from the inside out. Next comes the question of scale. If heart coherence is the rudder, then the micro choices you make each day are the strokes of the oar. Small, repeatable movements that, compounded, turn you toward entire new horizons. The rudder is set. Now comes the rowing, the micro choices that steer your vessel day after day. Grand declarations are attractive, but in truth, it's the tiny strokes, repeated consistently, that alter your trajectory. These decisions don't announce themselves with trumpets. They slip by in ordinary minutes, disguised as habits, scrolls and sighs. Yet they are architects of futures. Look closely. Each morning you face a fork that feels trivial. Reach for the phone or reach for breath. Both take seconds, both ripple. One scatters your signal into a flood of inputs you can't digest. The other anchors you, establishes coherence before the world can demand its tax. That is the first oar stroke. Small, but directional. Micro choices are like code written in the background of your day. You think you are improvising life, but you are executing scripts your unconscious installed long ago. To upgrade your trajectory, you don't need a revolution. You need edits, 3 lines of code rewritten today, 3 more tomorrow. Eventually, the software of your life runs on a new operating system. Here's an exercise. Audit 3 of your daily defaults. Maybe it's the snack you grab when restless, the auto tab you open when bored, the excuse you deploy when a challenge whispers. Replace each with a move that matches your frequency and tension. Restless, step outside and breathe sky instead of sugar. Bored, write a single line toward the project you've delayed. Excuse forming, replace it with one action so small it feels unthreatening but still pushes you forward. These swaps compound. Consider compound interest. A single dollar doubled daily outpaces millions left idle. The same law governs your choices. That single breath before reacting, repeated hundreds of times, rewires your nervous system's bias. That choice to pause scrolling and return to practice daily becomes hours of reclaimed life across a year. Small strokes turn ships. Skeptics argue these are too minor to matter. But what builds the mountain? Not boulders, but grains, layered without fanfare until their weight shapes continents. Micro choices are grains of destiny. They decide whether you erode or rise. Every insignificant act is a stone laid or a stone neglected. You already know this truth. Look back at skills you now carry effortlessly. Each was once foreign. Each required practice, typing, driving, speaking with clarity. They became part of you because of repetition, not rare inspiration. In the same way, today's small intentional choice becomes tomorrow's unconscious strength. What feels forced now becomes fluent later. So craft a decision architecture. Map your next 24 hours like an engineer of fate. Choose 3 anchor points: morning, midday, evening. Attach one signal consistent action to each. Morning breath before screen. Midday, water before caffeine. Evening, reflection before collapse. These anchors act as tuning forks that keep your signal stable despite the day's noise. Here's the mirror check. Which path are you rehearsing? Every repetition is rehearsal for a future self. Each snack, scroll, pause, or practice is a vote for who you are becoming. The ballot box is open all day, and every tick matters. Cast votes with care. The hero's journey isn't decided at the climax. It's decided in kitchens, commutes, and bathrooms, in the quiet moments when no one watches. That's where character is formed. And character is simply the sum of micro choices sustained long enough to bend probability into permanence. So row with intention, steer with coherence, repeat until the horizon shifts, because it will. It cannot not. The math of compounding does not lie. Up next, we audit the inner narrator, the voice that dresses fear as logic, that whispers wait when life whispers move. Once you see its mask, you'll reclaim the pen that has been writing your script. That voice inside your head, the one that sounds so reasonable, so calm, so protective. It tells you to wait until you're more and more prepared, to hold back until conditions are perfect, to be realistic. You've heard it 1,000 times, and because it borrows your tone and wears your memories, you've mistaken it for wisdom. But let's be clear that voice is not guidance. It is camouflage. Fear dressed in logic, survival instinct dressed in prudence, a bodyguard who never learned the difference between danger and destiny. Most people never question it. They obey, thinking they're being rational, when in truth they're surrendering to a jailer. The narrator whispers, "Not today, maybe tomorrow," and another year dissolves. It says, "Better safe than sorry," and opportunities collapse before they even get a chance to breathe. What feels like caution is actually erosion. What feels like protection is actually theft, stealing futures before they are born. This is not to demonize the voice. It was built from real scraps of your history. Childhood corrections, harsh words, embarrassments you still replay at night. Each fragment fused into a filter that wants to spare you repetition of pain. Its goal is mercy, but mercy has turned into exile because in shielding you from failure, it has also shielded you from flight. So here is the pivot. You do not silence the voice, you audit it. You place its claims under light. Is this fact, or is this memory pretending to be prophecy? Is this danger or discomfort? Does this logic serve survival, say, or expansion? Most of the time, you will find it is merely echo, not oracle. Try this rebuttal script, short and sharp. 4 lines to keep ready. I hear you. I know you're trying to keep me safe, but safety is not my highest calling. I choose alignment over fear. Say it aloud if you can. Watch how the body responds. The shoulders unclench. The breath expands. You've reclaimed authorship in a single declaration. Imagine holding a pen. Up until now, the narrator has been writing your story, scribbling margins with doubt, crossing out the lines of your courage. But pens are never glued. You can take it back. Each time you rebut the inner voice, you rip a page of false prophecy and draft a truer one. You remind the voice you are input, not authority. Here's a metaphor. Think of an overprotective GPS. Every time the road curves, it screams recalculate. You can obey endlessly, circling safe routes, or you can trust the horizon you feel drawn toward and drive anyway. The GPS may protest, but eventually it updates. The inner narrator works the same way. It learns new maps only when you insist on traveling roads it labeled forbidden. The stakes are higher than convenience, because if you never audit the narrator, it becomes your life editor. You'll arrive decades later realizing entire chapters never made it to print. Not because you lacked talent or time, but because a disguised whisper convinced you they weren't worth writing. Remember, the voice will never vanish completely, but you can shrink its power until it becomes background static. You do this by exposure, taking small actions. It warns against and surviving. Each survival is evidence. Each evidence weakens its credibility. Eventually, the narrator no longer commands. It consults. And you are free to thank it, smile at its persistence, and walk through the doors it once barred. You've learned to rebut fear's costume. Next, you'll learn about ignition windows, those 5-second sparks when courage flickers. and the old narrator lunges to smother it. In those moments, you'll practice striking first, choosing action before hesitation sets its hooks. Those sparks you feel the sudden flicker of, "I should do this," are ignition windows. They arrive unannounced, like tiny lightning bolts that illuminate a path for just a heartbeat. In that instant, courage is accessible. Possibility is alive. But wait even a few seconds, and the old narrator rushes in with its costume of logic, dousing the spark with water labeled later. That delay is where potential dies. Here's the truth. Hesitation is more dangerous than fear. Fear you can face head-on. Hesitation sneaks in quietly, convinces you to pause, and in the pause, momentum bleeds out. Neuroscientists suggest you have a narrow margin, mere seconds, before your brain's protective circuits override new impulses. Within that window, you either act or surrender. That's why ignition rituals matter. They are tools for catching lightning before it fades. Try this, the 5-second countdown. When the impulse arrives, don't debate, don't reason. Count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move. Call, stand, write, begin. The countdown bypasses the narrator by shifting the brain from rumination into action mode. It feels mechanical at first, almost childish, but it works because it shrinks the distance between knowing and doing. Over time, it becomes muscle memory. Pair it with the first-inch rule. Don't demand the whole project, the full speech, the entire workout. Demand only the first inch, opening the document, lacing the shoes, dialing the number. That first inch often drags the rest behind it. Think of lighting a match. You don't need the firewood blazing instantly. You need one spark to catch. The rest follows. You've seen this pattern in others. The entrepreneur who launches a rough draft instead of a polished masterpiece and iterates into success. The artist who posts one sketch instead of waiting for the perfect portfolio and builds an audience. The person who says yes to a conversation instead of rehearsing for months and meets the partner who shifts their life. These weren't massive leaps, they were ignition windows caught in time. Here's the practice. For 1 week, every time you sense a micro spark, text someone, jot an idea, move your body, use the countdown, move before the pause. At day's end, record which sparks you acted on. Watch the list grow. Each checkmark is evidence that you can live on the side of action rather than analysis. This doesn't mean recklessness. Ignition windows aren't about gambling your life. They're about refusing paralysis in everyday moments where hesitation steals your future. The risk isn't failure. The risk is never trying. By catching sparks, you increase your surface area for miracles, for meetings, for breakthroughs, for serendipity that cannot find you if you never step forward. Think of ignition like striking a match in the dark. The flame is fragile, but if you shield it from the wind of overthinking, it can light a torch. And once the torch is lit, you don't have to keep striking. Momentum takes over. The match is forgotten, but its spark changed everything. So practice catching sparks. Train your body to move before fear disguises itself as logic. Trust the countdown. Embrace the first inch and watch your life accumulate evidence that you are someone who acts, not someone who hesitates. Next, we expand the principle. If you don't need certainty to strike a match, you don't need certainty to walk a road. Readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision, and the path reveals itself one step at a time. Readiness. You've been taught it's something you wait for, like weather clearing or permission arriving in the mail. But here's the unvarnished truth: readiness is not a feeling. It is a choice. You do not stumble into it, you decide it. And you decide it before your body feels calm, before your mind feels certain, before the outcome feels guaranteed. Picture driving at night. Your headlights carve out maybe 200 feet of visibility. Beyond that is mystery. Yet you don't pull over until dawn. You move forward anyway, trusting that as you travel, the next stretch will reveal itself. That's how life works. You will never see the whole map. You are given just enough to take the next step, and movement is what illuminates more road. Another metaphor, a bridge forming under your feet. From a distance, it looks like nothing is there, but as you walk, planks appear, one by one. If you demand proof of the entire span before stepping, you'll remain frozen at the edge forever. The bridge is activated by motion, not observation. This is why waiting for complete readiness is self-sabotage. The people you admire, the builders, the creators, the pioneers, didn't start because they felt invincible. They started when they felt unqualified. They started while still trembling. What separated them wasn't confidence, it was willingness. They accepted that certainty is a luxury no one owns at the beginning. They knew clarity comes through steps, not before them. Here's a practical frame, the 200 feet plan. Stop demanding the whole journey. Ask instead, what is the next 200 feet? That might be one conversation, one page, 1 hour of practice. Small, specific, concrete. Once complete, the following stretch becomes visible. Stack enough of these 200-foot segments, and you've crossed entire landscapes without ever holding the entire map. Notice how this reframes fear. Fear asks for guarantees. Readiness says, I don't need guarantees. I need direction. Fear says, wait until you have proof. Readiness replies, proof is what I create by moving. Each step is evidence. Each action writes testimony that courage was present even when certainty was absent. Here's a ritual to try. When facing something daunting, ask yourself, if I had only headlights, what's visible right now? What's the next clear move within reach? Write it down, then commit. Don't debate the next 10 miles. Don't rehearse every possible obstacle. Just honor the visible stretch and walk it. The rest will appear when it must. Think of pioneers sailing into unknown waters. Their maps ended where their courage began. If they waited for certainty, coastlines would remain undiscovered. If you wait, your own interior coastline skills, ideas, callings stay hidden. But once you decide readiness, the act of moving lights your path. The world reveals itself to movers, not to waiters. So hold this paradox close. Readiness is not when fear leaves, but when you carry fear with you. The moment you decide, I am ready, you are, not because conditions changed, but because your relationship with uncertainty changed. You no longer see it as a wall, you see it as fog that thins as you walk. Next, we'll examine the economics of momentum, how delay compounds into scarcity, and how tiny daily investments flip the math of your destiny in your favor. Momentum is a currency. Spend it and it multiplies. Hoard it and it decays. Delay isn't neutral. It compounds like debt. Every day you postpone action, interest accrues in the form of lost confidence, missed opportunities, and habits that harden into walls. Momentum, on the other hand, compounds forward. Small deposits create outsized returns. This is the economics of your destiny. Imagine two people. One takes a daily 1% action toward their vision. The other waits for clarity, conditions, or courage. At first, the gap is invisible. 1 day versus 1 day looks like nothing. But weeks stack, and the curve bends. The actor accumulates evidence, skills, allies. The waiter accumulates hesitation, doubt, and regret. By the time they both look up, one has built momentum into capital. The other is bankrupt in motion. Think of momentum like rolling a snowball. Early effort feels disproportionate. You push, strain, get little to show. but keep nudging, and mass builds. Soon, gravity becomes your ally, and the ball pulls you instead of you pushing it. That's the tipping point of momentum. Delay denies you access to that slope. You remain forever at the stage of pushing tiny clumps that never gather critical weight. Here's a practice: build a daily 1% ledger. Each day, record one action that nudges you toward your chosen frequency. It doesn't need to be dramatic. Draft one paragraph. Make one outreach. Choose one healthier meal. Write it down. Stack it daily. At first, the ledger feels symbolic. Over months, it becomes a portfolio. Evidence that you are not drifting, you are compounding. And confidence grows because confidence is not a feeling. It's a byproduct of accumulated proof. Momentum also has a shadow side. Delay compounds in reverse. Skip the ledger for a week, and hesitation reclaims ground. Avoid a choice long enough, and avoidance becomes identity. You stop saying "I'm delaying" and start saying "I'm not that kind of person." That's the danger. Delay doesn't just stall progress, it edits self-concept. Guard against it with vigilance. One missed day is fine, a missed week becomes narrative. Math illustrates it too. Double a penny daily for 30 days. And you surpass $5 million, but wait just 5 days to start, and you end with less than a tenth of that. The opportunity cost of delay is exponential. This is not finance, it's physics of life. The projects you avoid, the relationships you don't nurture, the skills you postpone, they shrink not linearly, but geometrically. Delay is not waiting in neutral, it is sliding backward. Here's the reframing: momentum is more merciful than you think. It doesn't demand massive acts. It rewards consistency. A page a day builds a book. 10 push-ups a morning builds a body. 2 minutes of coherence before meetings rewires your nervous system. Momentum is quiet, patient, and loyal if you feed it. So ask, what deposits will you make today, not someday, not when fear loosens, not when clarity arrives, today. Because every tick of hesitation pays compound interest to the wrong account. Every nudge forward pays compound interest to your future. Up next, we'll explore identity lock-in, how to shift from acting occasionally into becoming someone permanently aligned. You won't just do coherent acts, you will be coherence itself. You've learned how small deposits compound, but if you only treat them as tasks, they remain fragile. Skip a day and momentum stutters. The deeper move is identity lock-in, shifting from "I do aligned things" to "I am an aligned person." Once it becomes who you are, resistance weakens. You no longer negotiate with every choice. You simply express your character. Think of actors on stage. They don't pause before each line to ask, "Should I say this?" They have absorbed the role until the script flows through them. Identity works the same way. When you embody coherence, your actions stop feeling like chores. They become natural expressions of self. This is not about pretending, it's about rehearsal until the role becomes real. Here's the practice. First, craft a one-sentence identity statement. Short, declarative, present tense. I am someone who keeps promises to myself. I am a person who acts before hesitation grows teeth. I am a builder of coherence in every room I enter. Keep it crisp, less than 10 words, if possible. This is your spine. Second, audit your language hygiene. Words sculpt identity more than you realize. Every time you say, "I'm bad at this," "I never follow through," "I can't handle pressure," you etch grooves that the nervous system interprets as truth. Replace with cleaner phrases: "I'm learning," "I'm practicing," "I choose." This isn't delusion, it's training. Identity follows repetition. Third, create a 3Q embodiment loop. Anchor it to daily rhythms. Example each morning, hand on chest. Repeat the sentence once. each midday. Pause before a meal. Breathe once. Repeat. Each evening while brushing teeth. Repeat again. Small cues tie the statement to the body. Over weeks, it becomes reflex. The sentence stops being words and starts being lived. Identity lock-in explains why some people sustain transformation while others collapse back into patterns. The ones who fail treated the shift as a project. The ones who succeed treated it as selfhood. When you change identity, relapse feels unnatural. You don't debate jogging if you see yourself as an athlete. You don't debate honesty if you see yourself as trustworthy. You don't debate coherence if you see yourself as coherence itself. Metaphor: iron filings around a magnet. Actions are filings, scattered unless magnetized. Identity is the magnet. Without it, filings scatter at the first bump. With it, they align automatically. Your magnet pulls behavior into formation. You stop forcing, you start flowing. This does not mean rigidity. Identity can evolve, but each chapter of your life needs a central statement, a core that upholds until growth demands a rewrite. Think of it like a software version. Version 1.0 carried you here. Version 2.0 is required for where you're going. Upgrades aren't betrayals, they're continuations. So write your sentence. Clean your language. Anchor the loop. Do this until actions feel inevitable, not optional. That's identity lock-in. That's how temporary effort becomes permanent architecture. Now, turn outward. You've tuned your signal and locked your identity, but your field doesn't exist in isolation. The next section explores your social environment, how others mirror your broadcast, test your coherence, and require boundaries to keep your signal intact. Your frequency doesn't float in a vacuum. It ripples into rooms, brushes against people, and meets their fields. Every environment, every relationship is either amplifying your signal or draining it. That's why social ecology matters. You can cultivate coherence within, but if you don't guard the boundaries around you, static will seep back in. Think of a tuning fork again. Strike it, and another fork across the table hums in response. Humans work the same way. Your steadiness makes others settle. Your chaos makes others jitter. But it runs both ways. Their unresolved noise can infiltrate your broadcast if you aren't intentional. Without boundaries, you become an open receiver to everyone else's static. So here's the first step: calibration. Pay attention to how you feel after time with someone. Do you leave sharper, calmer, inspired, or drained, doubtful, cloudy? That feeling is feedback. Don't dismiss it. It is your nervous system telling you whether this connection is harmonizing or hijacking your signal. Next, boundaries. Many hear that word and picture conflict, but boundaries are not weapons. They're membranes. They allow life to flow in both directions while keeping integrity intact. Without them, your field leaks. With them, you preserve coherence. Boundaries are less about pushing people away and more about protecting resonance. Here's a role play you can rehearse. Imagine someone invites you into misalignment gossip, procrastination, fear disguised as caution. Instead of collapsing, you say, "I appreciate you sharing. For me, I need to focus on insert aligned path. I care about you, but I can't spend energy there right now." Or simply, "No, thank you." Short, clean, no apology. Boundaries don't need novels, they need clarity. Now consider space. Your environment holds memory. Rooms where you've collapsed into distraction carry residue. You can reset them with small rituals. Before work, light a candle, breathe coherence, and declare intent. Rearrange a desk, clear clutter, adjust light. These physical cues reinforce identity and remind your body here. I broadcast alignment. Remember, You are not only influenced, you are an influencer of atmospheres. Walk into a chaotic room with grounded coherence and watch the air change. People may not name it, but they feel it. Conversations slow, breaths deepen. That's not arrogance, that's physics of presence. This is why curating your ecology matters. Protect coherence from corrosive inputs. Strengthen coherence with allies and environments that mirror your chosen frequency. Create sanctuaries, physical and relational, where your identity isn't questioned but reinforced. Because your frequency is not fragile, but it is precious, and the more you stabilize it within, the more fiercely you must guard it without. Now the circle closes. You've moved from motivation to frequency, from sparks to coherence, from micro choices to identity, and from solitude to ecology. The journey ends not with a hype crescendo, but with a steadying benediction, a wind down that gathers everything into one breath and leaves you standing clear, ready, and aligned. You've walked through a map that was never meant to hype you for a moment, but to anchor you for a lifetime. From motivation's fireworks to frequency's hearth, from scattered sparks to sustained coherence, from tiny micro-choices to the architecture of identity, you've traced the contours of transformation step by step. And now, at the edge of this journey, the invitation is to exhale, to soften, to let the truth settle, not as adrenaline, but as steady rhythm. Take a slow breath here. Feel the body you've been carrying this whole time. It has endured delays, absorbed disappointments, weathered storms you thought would end you, and yet here you are, still breathing, still willing, still curious enough to listen, still brave enough to wonder if more is possible. That alone is evidence of resilience. That alone is proof of power. Understand this transformation is not something waiting in the distance. It has already begun. Every word you lingered on shifted neural pathways. Every visualization rewired circuitry. Every breath you anchored opened a doorway. This is not entertainment. This is initiation. And even if the world cannot see the change yet, your inner field already hums at a different pitch. The ripples will reach further than you imagine. So what happens now? You carry it forward not as pressure, but as practice. One heartbeat of coherence before you enter a room. One spark caught before hesitation kills it. One small vote for the future self you've chosen. These are not trivial. They are tectonic. They move ground that seemed immovable, and when repeated, they become who you are. The mind will still try to argue. The inner narrator will still disguise fear as logic. But you now hold tools sharper than doubt, a countdown that collapses hesitation, a sentence that locks identity, a ledger that compounds confidence, a ritual that resets space. These are not theories. They are handles you can grip when the old tides pull. And if you ever question whether it matters, return to this. The universe has already confirmed your readiness. You wouldn't be here at this precise moment carrying these words inside you if it weren't so. Synchronicity isn't random, it's a mirror. The very fact that this message found you is proof you're tuned to a frequency of awakening. So walk steady, guard your ecology, practice coherence until it becomes signature. Decide readiness instead of waiting for it. And above all, trust the simple truth: every future you long for is seated in this moment, in this choice, in this breath. Before you close, pause. Ask yourself gently, what is the smallest action I can take today to honor the frequency I've chosen? Do it. That one step is enough. That one step is everything. Your future self will thank you. Your field will strengthen because of you. And the world will feel the ripple of a signal held steady, lit not by hype, but by the quiet, undeniable power of alignment.